I'm Ben Meiselas from the MeidasTouch Network, and this is a breaking news alert. We are learning that Kash Patel, a former aide in the Trump administration and a current ally of Donald Trump and enabler, a co-conspirator of Donald Trump, if you will, pled the Fifth Amendment when he spoke before a Washington, D.C. federal grand jury on October 13th and was asked questions about the stolen records, the top sensitive compartmented information, the classified records, and the thousands of other government records that Donald Trump stole and concealed at Mar-A-Lago. Now, Kash Patel would go on the social media platforms and speak to Breitbart and talk about declassifying information about Russia and declassifying all of this information and that he was there when it took place and all of that. But when Kash Patel was subpoenaed to speak before this grand jury in Washington, D.C., he did what we're seeing all these MAGA extremists do who go on their podcast or go to these fascist rallies or go on social media and spread disinformation, but when they're in a court of law, they plead the Fifth Amendment. And you'll recall from our other reporting here on the MeidasTouch Network that Kash Patel was seen leaving the D.C. courthouse on October 13th, and many people wondered why he was there because the media was there. There's a Proud Boy plea agreement taking place on or around that day. You've got the Oath Keeper seditious conspiracy trial taking place that day. You had Mark Short, the former chief of staff to former Vice President Pence, who was testifying before another grand jury, a different grand jury in a different room about the January 6th insurrection. And Mark Short had previously testified back in July, but was not allowed to answer certain questions at that time because Donald Trump had asserted an executive privilege, but Donald Trump's objections were overruled by the chief judge in Washington, D.C., who was overseeing those secret grand jury proceedings taking place. And so Mark Short was ordered back and had to testify on those other areas which he previously did not testify to back in July, where executive privilege was asserted. But on that day, October 13th, people see Kash Patel leaving. They were wondering why. And then it became clear, and the media learned, and the New York Times and other places reported that Kash Patel was there because he was speaking before the grand jury investigating Donald Trump's criminal conduct for obstruction, Espionage Act, and concealment and mutilation relating to the thousands of records that he stole from the government, including top secret sensitive compartmented information and other top secret classified information and other government records which he hid and concealed at Mar-A-Lago. Now, one of the things we are also learning is that the Department of Justice is trying to seek to compel Kash Patel to testify, even though Kash Patel is invoking his Fifth Amendment rights against self-incrimination. And what this most likely means is that two things could be happening here. On the one hand, the Department of Justice could be offering Kash Patel immunity, specifically relating to the questioning at issue relating to the stolen documents at Mar-A-Lago, because if you are granted immunity and you can't be prosecuted, the invocation of the Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination no longer applies because you can't be incriminated if you have immunity. So in that case, Kash Patel, if he's given immunity on these issues related to the stolen records at Mar-A-Lago, he could actually be compelled to testify, and if he testifies falsely, he can then be charged with perjury, and then if he refuses to testify, he can be charged with contempt after he is given this immunity grant. So that's one aspect of what the Department of Justice could be doing. Another thing, because sometimes the Department of Justice doesn't want to give a criminal immunity, they may offer a cooperation agreement, a cooperation agreement in lieu of prosecuting that individual and say, look, we're either going to prosecute you and charge you with a crime, or you could cooperate, and we will either be lenient on your sentencing or we won't charge you. But it's definitely something that's short of a actual blanket immunity grant. And so that could be one of the things that the Department of Justice is also offering here. We're also learning that the Department of Justice is focused on an individual by the name of Walt Nauta. And Walt Nauta was he's described as a valet in the Trump White House, who would move the cars, but he was also known as the person who would get Trump his Diet Pepsi. And then Trump took a liking to the way this individual got him the Diet Pepsi. Well, Will Nauta previously, after Trump's left the White House, Will Nauta then continued to work with Trump at Mar-A-Lago and doing some of the same things there, kind of like a gopher. He was previously asked questions by the FBI regarding the documents that Donald Trump had stolen, and the Department of Justice and FBI believes that Will Nauta was not telling them the truth in the first interview about his involvement relating to the documents that Donald Trump had stolen, because in the first interview, Will Nauta didn't talk about moving the records from the storage area to other locations. Later, the Department of Justice subpoenaed the surveillance footage at Mar-A-Lago and discovered that Will Nauta had taken boxes and other storage and had moved it to another room. And then in the second interview, Will Nauta had kind of admitted to doing that, but because he lied to the FBI or is believed to not have told the truth to the FBI in the first interview that they gave, one of the things that federal prosecutors are doing is applying pressure to him as well to provide testimony which would link Trump and Trump's intent to obstruct and to move these records and to hide them in response to the grand jury subpoena for these records that the grand jury issued to Donald Trump somewhere around in May when the grand jury issued that subpoena. And then in June, you'll recall that Christina Bobb, who identifies herself now as a custodian of records, but she's Trump's lawyers, and the lawyer Evan Corcoran gave back a red weld to the Department of Justice, this folder with top secret records in them, and basically said, here's all the records that we have. There are no other records at Mar-A-Lago, and they submitted a declaration confirming that there was no other records. And of course, that declaration submitted to the FBI around June 3rd of this year was false, because clearly a diligent search was not made of Mar-A-Lago, where the Department of Justice went in on August 8th and found thousands of government records, over 11,000 documents, and over 100 classified, top secret, sensitive, compartmented information that the Department of Justice now has in its custody and control after the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals ordered that the records be returned to them after Judge Eileen Cannon, the district court judge, made those terrible rulings, preventing the Department of Justice from having access to its own classified records. And so many believe that this is an escalation of the Department of Justice's criminal investigation into Donald Trump. Many believe that this is bringing the investigation, and I'm one of them, bringing the investigation into kind of a new phase of focusing on the key players and their involvement, and potentially charging those individuals, Will Nauta and Kash Patel, for their, or offering them a way out, whether that's a cooperation agreement or providing a limited immunity to them, which wouldn't be a broad blanket immunity for every crime. It would be limited to what this investigation is about, to compel their testimony against Donald Trump. And so definitely entering a new phase there. And as the Department of Justice is doing that on the parallel track, they're filed an expedited appeal. The 11th Circuit granted their ability to file an expedited appeal regarding whether Judge Eileen Cannon should have asserted jurisdiction at all. Newsflash, she shouldn't have exercised jurisdiction and put this case in a special master posture anyway, as I've predicted here with a high degree of confidence. The 11th Circuit Court of Appeals is going to overrule Judge Eileen Cannon. My prediction that happens late November, early December, and states that Judge Eileen Cannon should not have ever asserted jurisdiction in this case, and that whole special master process is going to stop and cease to exist. I have a high degree of confidence that's going to take place. And so the Department of Justice has a lot going on at the same time. Certainly a lot of pressure that Will Nauta has got is under. He put himself in a bind, as the same thing with MAGA stands for Make Attorneys Get Attorneys. You know, there's the other expressions that everything that Donald Trump touches goes to shit. And here we got someone, Will Nauta or Walt Nauta, who finds himself in a very difficult bind and likely could be criminally prosecuted for his conduct if indeed he moved these records and was involved in the obstructive conduct. And you have Kash Patel, who went to, he gave an interview on Breitbart in May, and he was bragging about Trump declassified Russia documents. He declassified these documents. He declassified all these documents relating to our national security interests because he wants to make it all public. Then when you ask questions, Kash Patel, I plead the fifth, I plead the fifth, I plead the fifth. It's that performative BS cosplay fascism. I mean, and it's cosplay fascism, but if we don't really focus on what real law and order is, the cosplay fascism actually could become fascism. And that's why we got to call it out. That's why the media needs to do a great job calling it out. I want to give props to the New York Times, who's had some great reporting, as well as the Washington Post here on their sources in the case, specifically here with Kash Patel pleading the fifth. We learned about that from some New York Times reporting. But we need all the media to where is, other than MeidasTouch network. And fortunately, the size of our network right now is bigger than most of the mainstream networks. Just look at the people who watch our YouTube versus any of the others. And more people almost watch our YouTube than watch cable news, which is fantastic. So that's why you got to subscribe. But this needs to be a focal point. And what we need to focus on as well are people like Kash Patel, because to me, it is the ultimate cowardice in the world. And I believe strongly, I don't get upset at people normally who invoke their Fifth Amendment rights. It's a constitutional right. So I don't want to say, oh, you invoked the Fifth, like in a criminal setting. You invoked your Fifth. What a horrible person for invoking the Fifth. And look, it's a constitutional right. But where I draw a line is like where people go on their social media and start talking about all of these things and spreading disinformation and acting like tough guys or tough people and all of this. And then you've made yourself a target because you've went out in there and you bragged about the crimes. And then you're asked questions about it, or you spread the lies, and then you're asked questions about it. And you go, I invoke my Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination. I invoke my Fifth Amendment on the advice of my attorney. I invoke my right against Fifth Amendment against self-incrimination. Come on. It's absurd. We'll keep you updated with more developments here, but this is promising news that the Department of Justice is escalating its investigation of Donald Trump's criminality here, as demonstrated by their efforts with Kash Patel. And it is interesting that Kash Patel is invoking his Fifth Amendment rights, and the role of Will Nauta, this little-known Diet Coke gopher who's now has been hauled into this mess of criminality that Donald Trump weaves. I'm Ben Meiselas from the MeidasTouch Network. Hit the subscribe button right now. We are on our way to 1 million subscribers with your support. Hit the subscribe button right now. And in addition to subscribing here, if you want to help grow this independent media network, check us out at patreon.com/MeidasTouch, patreon.com/MeidasTouch. There are a number of exclusive membership benefits there. You could join one of the membership tiers there. But most importantly, I get asked by you all the time, how can you help grow this independent media platform? Well, look, we have no outside investors. Our competitors are funded by billionaires and millionaires, and they have billions of dollars literally. And we are having a bigger impact with more engagement, literally just thanks to you, because that's who we're powered by, you. We don't have any of that funding. So if you want to help support us, go check us out at patreon.com/MeidasTouch. Until next time, I'm Ben Meiselas.
MeidasTouch is unapologetically pro-democracy. And look, we know you are too. So please make sure you check out our best-selling shirt and our best-selling gear, the unapologetically pro-democracy gear. And hey, while you're at it, make sure you check out my favorite shirt and one of our most famous designs, It Wasn't Rigged, You're Just a Loser, at store.meidastouch.com. That's store.meidastouch.com.